Join me as we take a closer look at the torso of the human body. That's where all this massive force is generated. We're going to figure out what anatomy is actually doing that. And basically, this section has been called the core of the body, especially again from those of you that work out. So what is the core? The core is basically the whole middle area of the figure between the rib cage to the pelvis and all the musculature that connects the two. In this video, I'm going to primarily focus on just like some high level concepts as to what does the core do, right? Based on force, like what's the functionality of it? Why are these muscles here? So the main thing to understand is that we have these two regions of the figure that are rigid, right? Which is the rib cage and the pelvis. And these are, as you can see, my simple abstractions of them. So number one and number three. Number two is the actual region of musculature that basically surrounds all your innards, right? But what that area does is allow for flexibility between these two rigid areas, again, the rib cage and the pelvis. Now, granted, in the back, right, in the background here is your spine, right? But that is super flexible, as we know. So this region number two, the core, is really, really, really important to the body, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. So in drawing D, you can see the blue arrow, of course, describes applied force, and green is contraction, right? This represents the letter C, right? This is a C shape, meaning it's doing this, okay? Say it's going from here to here to here. Because we're contracting here, like in the front of the abdomen, here's a letter C again, except going the other way. It's like this. And therefore, we're contracting like the lower back and stretching right here. We're stretching across the front of the body, right? So contraction basically on the front of the body or contraction in the back of the body causes force to be on the opposite side of the figure. So in this case, stretch in the back or stretch in the front, right? So that's pretty simple. That's front to back contraction and force stretch. The more complex thing, and I remember myself trying to figure this out, is when there's rotation in the figure. Here, green again is representing contraction and the blue is representing, again, directional force, and orange with applied. And here we're creating a new type of energy, which is torque, right? Which is the idea of us spinning something in one direction versus the opposite direction, right? Makes these things create energy by going opposite directions, which means to relax it, it wants to unwind, right? So you're like, I guess one way of looking at this would be to wind it up, right? So the opposite of winding it up would be releasing it. And that's basically how you do something like throw a ball, right? You're contracting and winding up and creating torque in your core in order to release it, right? Torque combined with, let's say, your arm being pulled back, and that torque bringing your shoulder forward and then releasing with your arm, as what creates a ton of velocity at the end of your fingertips when, for instance, you're throwing a baseball, right? And it's going 80 to 120 miles an hour, right? So that's a lot of power. This is something to keep in mind for the core. High level functionality. We have bending, of course. You have front to back bending and torque. Let me see if I have in here. There's one other thing I want to talk to you guys about. So besides the concept of front to back, there's also left to right. That's this guy here. So what I'm saying here is if you have the front of the body and here's the rib cage and here's the pelvis, obviously you can do this as well. And then you'd have contraction here. And that would also give you a letter C, like, so the body would look like this. And you'd have force over here, and it would go from here to here, and that would give us this letter C, or the flip of it. So these diagrams, what they're doing is taking the simplicity that you just saw in the prior drawings and adding some anatomy to it, right? So now you're actually seeing the musculature do its job, right? In this case, it's the abdomen, right? The abdominal muscles and some of the serratus and obliques that are contracting right in the front. And this is why you do sit-ups, for instance, to build up your abs, right? Because you're contracting those muscles and that's what makes them stronger. Notice all the force, right? The applied force and all the heat of the applied force in here, and then this blue directional. And then this is an example of rotation, right? This blue arrow here is talking about turning the body around, right? And you can see how force goes from one area to the other, and it's because we're contracting here. And then finally, this is a representation of what I just discussed below. Okay, last but not least, blue is the two rigid areas. Green represents the core. And you can see here, turning and, to make this even more sophisticated, turning and tilting, right? So not only is this is not only a linear rotation, meaning if you have an object here and you have an object here, not only are we not just doing this, right, like going in and out of the page in opposite directions, I've also angled the torso relative to the pelvis, right? So you can see that there's a lot of force over here, and the abdominal muscles would stretch, right? They're connected, and we'll get into this next week a little bit more in our next video, I should say. They're connected, the abdominal muscles are connected to the lower rib cage, right? And they're connected down to the pelvis, right? So they're basically stretching from here to here, right? There's all this stretching going on, right? So keep that in mind. And that's it. So that's just a super high level overview. The next video will go more into the details about the front view of the core, talk about the abdomen, the obliques, and the serratus. And yeah, some really awesome advice on the serratus, things that I had learned actually on writing this book, actually. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.